The things that they once held dear were moving away from them. The principles that they taught their children were no longer being taught. And so we find that Israel is in a bad place. And that's where Nehemiah and Ezra come into the picture. So this week we were dealing with how associations affect us, not just as individuals, but collectively as a people. How when we don't choose even our spouses correctly, how it impacts families and how families impact the church and how an entire nation could have been crippled as it were because of those decisions. So a highlight I saw on the Sabbath afternoon was not only do spouses influence each other, but also the impact of children's faith happens when choices in spouses are not taken. So, panelists, we're going to Sunday. Tell me about Nehemiah's reaction to what was happening here.
Well, Nehemiah was not pleased with what he saw. As a matter of fact, the memory text, which was a part of a prayer, it is because of what he saw in the intermarriage that was taking place among the Israelites. And he just could not believe what he was seeing. And, you know, of course, further in the lesson, we'll come across the drastic measures that he took with what he was seeing among the people.
Thank you. So Nehemiah came and he saw, and what exactly, we speak of how he saw them marrying, the Jews were marrying other women, but there was something specific that was happening with the language. Any one of my panelists want to expound on what was happening in the family structure now that these Israelite men had taken on women from Ashdod and Ammon and Moab? What was happening to the language of the Israelites as a result?
They weren't able to speak Aramaic, which was the language that was used, and as a result, they couldn't understand the teachings that was presented to them because there was a language barrier. And we need to understand that when language, it has a lot to do with concept, and in concept I mean biblical concept. So if you're unable to understand, then you won't be guided by the principles or the teachings that was present at that time.
Thank you so much. So language was important, and what we have to understand here is that because they were now marrying, and we have to think back also to the time that in that setting, back in those days, the woman stayed home, and the woman reared the children more than, had a very instrumental role in the rearing of the children, in teaching them principles. So here we have Israelite men marrying these women, and they don't even know the language. They don't even know anything about God. And so their children were being raised, and the principles were now foreign to them. They knew not of all the things that these Israelite men knew because the wives didn't know, and now they were raising a whole new generation who was oblivious to the teachings of God. They did not even understand the language. So if they saw it written or were given scriptures, they couldn't understand. Why? Because they were not taught. And so it says here, the language we speak, as Rachel was saying, it informs the way we think about concepts, and because we use vocabulary, and when they lose that, it meant they were losing their identity. And I think a lot of us can relate. We could take it even to, a lot of us here can relate to the concept of being migrants. And we all grew up in probably different places. And when we were there were certain things that we saw a lot or heard a lot. Or I'm not even thinking of it in a religious way. No, I'm thinking of it even in civics, or, you know, who are our heroes or our national things that are privy to what we learn. And we move here or to another land. And before long, I'm sure if I said to my daughter, who is nanny of the Maroons, it means nothing to her. She knows more of the things that are taught here. So she's, in a sense, losing, well, she doesn't have an identity, she wasn't born there, but the identity I have with my home country is lost in her in some respect. Do you understand what we're saying? So it was with the spiritual things. Spiritual things were now becoming foreign to them. And so Nehemiah was. What was his reaction, my brother? Tell her, how did Nehemiah react to that? Was he just, oh wow, I'm so sad to see what's going on here. Wow, this is every. What was Nehemiah's reaction to this?
His reaction as we read, study further on, he wasn't happy.
All right.
The bottom line is no matter how much you see the things going on, once you're standing for God and if his principle is not of God, you're not going to be happy.
Right.
So Nehemiah at that point didn't happy with the way the people were living, because as you said, if you lose your identity, which is if you have a road of the identity of Christ and you lose it, Nehemiah there was as a leader. He wasn't happy because the people were losing their identity of following the Christ.
Can I interject?
Go ahead.
Okay. If we read in Nehemiah 13, we'll see the drastic measures that he took. And many of us might have said, this man was crazy. But it actually says that, and I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them and plucked off their hair and made them swear by God, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons or for yourselves. When I read this, I was like, wow, this was some drastic measure that as a leader he took, and we could understand how he was upset. These people were not following what God intended for them. So he was upset, and to take these measures, I don't know if as a church, how do we feel about a leader doing these things? Was it acceptable? Is it something that was practiced during that time?
All right. So now we're talking about his actual, all right, I see my hands popping up. His actual reaction to what he saw. And we're talking about the cursings and plucking out, and I see a couple hands there, and I'm about to take you in a minute. I like that the lesson, though, goes on to explain what this means, because in our language, when we think of cursing, we may have had a different initial thought of, wow, the man of God is cursing. Because when we use cursing, we have a very different concept of a curse word or what that may be. But as I went to Deuteronomy 28, I don't know if we found the time to read some of the curses that he was. What in essence he was saying is, you have gone contrary to what our covenant is. These people are covenant with God. And God is a covenant-keeping God. You keep your end, I'll keep my end. You don't keep your end, there's also consequences. It's just that simple. And he was saying, you have gone against what God has said, and now these things are about to come upon you. And I'll quickly just go over a couple of them that he mentioned. In Deuteronomy 28, verse 15 and beyond, it says, but it shall come to pass, if you will not hearken unto the voice of the Lord your God, to observe and to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, all these curses shall come upon thee. And this is the curses he's telling them. Cursed you shall be in the city. Cursed you're going to be in the field. Cursed shall be your basket and your store. Cursed shall be the fruit of your body, the fruit of your land. Cursed you're going to be when you come in. Cursed you're going to be when you come out. And I can just see him saying, man, we are cursed. We are a cursed people because of what we are doing. Everything we touch is going bad now. Nothing is going to go good because of the choices that we are making. And I can only think to myself, we are modern day Israel. We're not keeping our end of the bargain. What's happening to us? Could it be that sometimes why we are not able to enjoy certain blessings is because we are cursed? I'll take a hand from down. Brother, I see Brother Wilson, Brother Green.
Which one are you taking? Oh, you're taking Brother Wilson. Concerning the children and the language barrier that was among them, if we take it to our time today, we will notice for real that when you have a Christian husband and a non-Christian wife, or a Christian wife and a non-Christian husband, you tend to have the children growing up in a confused manner. Which one should I follow? The one that is going to church or the one that is going to the bar? Or should I stay home and watch television or should I go to church with one of them? You have the children are being confused. So it is always in the best interest of the children that the mother and the father follow the Lord together.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Green.
What we need to look at is the background. Israel sinned, went into captivity. Israel failed to go into the promised land because they have sinned. And Nehemiah and Ezra, they were really students of the Bible and prophecy. And when they saw that Israel lost this time because of what they have done, then they understand that if Israel sin again, it's a total wipeout because these were the remnant now. This is the remnant now coming back now to Babylon. And when you take in all the nation around you with their idolism, the parents, the mother, like you said, stay home and train those children. Those children are going to be the future for Israel. And the children are going to learn now all the doctrines of heathenism in Jerusalem. And the whole church structure would have been annihilated now because everything, the next generation come up would be heathenism. And Nehemiah was wrought. So don't say Nehemiah is crazy. He really wants people to understand that the sin you have committed is a total loss. So get it right. And then now, by doing that now, the brethren realized what they were into. And he said to them, you have to put away all the strange wives, and we start over again.
All right. Brother, all right. I'm gonna start timing us. We're at Sunday. We have a long way to go.
Thank you for
Elder?
taking my comment. Well, of course, we agree that there must be some restriction as to how we live. Yes, we are to learn from Nehemiah's example, but we have to also understand that we're living in a different culture. And so whilst we want to correct maybe Nehemiah's, I don't know if it was his culture back there to be so extremely drastic, but of course, we will have to bring across the same message in a different language to the generation that we're living in now, and to lead them in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. So even though, and I know my generation and older than me believe that we need the Nehemiah's approach again. But but I really believe that, you know, we have to find a way to correct and not to be so drastic.
We're gonna take Elder Harris, and then we're gonna we're touching a lot of things that I have here. So we're keeping moving.
Yes. In regards to the intermarriage, and although the lesson based on the physical intermarriage, man and woman, I'm going to ask something. I know it might stir up a new kind of worm. But what about, and that was back then with the Israelites back there, the same kind of intermarriage exists among us as Seventh-day Adventists today. And I'm talking about the physical marriage.
Yes.
But I step a little further. In your opening remarks, you said we are going to discuss the lesson, not about what we feel, but about thus said the Lord. But sometimes you have to make an application. Are we today involving in the physical intermarriage? Also, can it carry, I'm just asking a question now, can it carry a spiritual intermarriage also? I would love if one of the panel could answer to that.
Well,
but I'm just going to sit down and let you answer. For, you know, sometimes, all right, I don't want to say it for I will be actually answering the question.
All right.
well, based on based on what I'm understanding from you, is like, let's say two Adventists got married, but one is not living up to the standard, and one can actually affect the other to bring them down instead of bringing them up. Is that what you say? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking about the spiritual intermarriage. I said not with man and woman, no. The spiritual.
Or two churches, like two churches, one?
No. All right.
Brother Harris, are you referring to bringing stuff like worldly things into our worship, into our church? Is that the direction in which you're heading?
That's the direction I'm going.
Oh, well, we know it happens. We know it happens. I mean, Spirit of Prophecy talks about it. You know, so it definitely happens. It's just that we as elders and leaders have to be knowledgeable of these facts, and when it approaches or it happens, it has to be nipped at the bud so that it do not continue. Because what happens, sometimes we have some strong, determined church members, and irrespective that something is wrong, if they like it and they are in some kind of leadership role, they will just introduce it and put it in and bring it in church. And they look at the elders to see their reaction. And if they do not react against it, guess what happened? Next year, it gets bigger. And the following year, it gets bigger because they know that the leaders of the church is silent about it. So these individuals test the elders. So the elders know how to know that they have to nip it at the bud. The moment it appears, fix it, so it do not continue.
All right. I knew it to be a very good study, and I see your hand, Elder Gahiga, and I have to give you 30 seconds. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. We're still at Sunday, but we're taking in other things that are in other lessons, but I want us to touch a few things before we end. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of how Elder George answered the question and what Brother Dean had said about, you know, the generation that we're living in now. I don't think that there is ever a time when righteous indignation should be like, take it down a notch. In any generation, it's the same. So, what Elder George had said, you got to nip it in the bud. Sometimes you got to have righteous indignation, and it's got to be just like that. So, I don't think whichever generation it is, you should notch it down a little. It's always the same.
All right, thank you. On that note, we're going to move forward because, yes, I had a question, and we have pretty much touched it. Because I was saying we saw that Nehemiah had that public rebuke going on. And is there a place for that in the church today? I think it will take great wisdom. There are times when things have to be done in a public way. There are certain things that have come in certain way that affect the church as a whole, and it has to be addressed publicly. Cannot be done in private. It has to be addressed. And the Bible speaks to that, and the Spirit of Prophecy also does in Testimonies to the Church, where it speaks about there are those who ever despise the one who dares to reprove sin. But there are times when reproof must be given. Paul directs Titus to rebuke a certain class sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. Men and women who, with their different organizations, are brought together in church capacity have peculiarities and faults. As these develop, they will require reproof. If we want to be sharpened and go to the kingdom, there is a place for that. Now, I believe there is wisdom, to go with Elder Dean. That wisdom must be exercised. And I believe if we are truly children of God, we will know what is when. Because it's not a time everything needs to be public. There is a time that you're supposed to take to the corner and the left don't need to know what's going on with the right. But there is time that public reproof is necessary for the good of the church. All right, Monday, we are moving on. And like I said, some things are already getting touched, so we're just going to be surfacing it now. Monday speaks about Nehemiah's reproof. And we spoke of Solomon. And one thing about the Bible that is beautiful, the Bible is not a showcase of perfect people. The Bible is a showcase of people who fell out of the show. Listen, don't make this mistake. Solomon was a typical example of a person who was brought down because he did not follow what God stipulated. And he's left as an example for us that no matter who you are, you could be the king on the throne, you have to follow what God says. So no matter who we are, we have a responsibility to stay true to God's law and what he requires of us. To my panel, all throughout scripture, the Lord has counseled Israel not to marry people from the heathen nations. How applicable is that counsel for us today in people seeking to marry? And what consequences are we seeing today from not regarding this instruction?
Well, we can see the detriment it has caused even among God's people today.
Yes.
And if you take a survey, you would find that half of the divorces that are in the church, most of the individuals that are divorced to the other party are people that they pull out from the community, that were not God-fearing people. And these people come to the church with the intention of marrying, but never fall in love with Christ. So guess what happened a few years down the road? When the Coca-Cola shape no longer can be seen and there are children in the midst and everybody is in a different mindset, the one that did not come for Christ, he gives up on Christ or she gives up on Christ. And guess what happened? There is chaos in the family. Why? Because God said before, don't do it. And it's not because God is racist. It's because of idolatry that God is preventing his people from practicing. Because if there is something that gets under God's skin, is idolatry. Idolatry, God don't mess with idolatry. It affects him. That's why he says, I'm a jealous God. Nobody should worship another God apart from me. God hates idolatry with a passion. And whatever he does, whatever we do, brethren, if we go wrong, we suffer the consequences.
Just to piggyback off Brother George, I think one of the mistakes that we make as people of God is that thinking that we can change people. We intermarry and then we're like, oh, they will change when they come. But oftentimes, most times, the Adventists are the ones who are changed. They're the ones who are taken out of the church. And we see, and in the Bible, we see marriages that weren't approved by God, like Ahab and Jezebel, Samson and Delilah. And these are examples to us that when we think we can change people and bring them over to God, but God is the only one who can change the heart. And we make that mistake as a people.
Amen. So we're speaking of the intermarriage, and the lesson is clear to show that it's not about race or that thing. It was more about idolatry, as Elder stated, and that the core, we have to be the same at the core, the same values, worshiping the same God, having the same beliefs. So it's not that we can't marry people of other nationalities or other places, but we have to be one in faith. No matter where, if you decide to leave here and move to the Philippines and you find your spouse there, it has to be a person who is one in the faith. And that is key as we move on to Tuesday. Tuesday, Ezra reacts. And Ezra now is coming in on the scene, and he too is perturbed with what is going on with God's people. And he used the word separated, that they need to separate. There needs to be a separation, is what Ezra was saying. But what did this separation really entail? The marrying with the non-believers, what kind of separation was he speaking of? And it came out as we read those verses up there at the top. Does anybody know exactly what are we talking about? Separating in terms of what? Holy, yes? Right?
And between clean
yes.
and the unclean.
Yes. Light versus darkness. Ezra was ashamed that God, this is what your people are doing. Look at us. Look at us all mingled and intertwined, marrying, having families with these heathen people who are worshiping idols, who know not God. This is where we are, and that is why our memory verse said what it said when he said, God, I'm so ashamed to even lift my face to you, to believe that this is where we are. Our iniquities are higher than our heads, and our guilt has grown up to the heavens. I wanted to take it a step further, and I know I got until 10:45, and time is leaving me, and I still have hands, but I want to take that step further this morning, because the Bible is only the Bible until it becomes applicable to us. It's just a book. Unless God changes and allows us to use His words to bring change to our life. We could read it. That's why some people go from cover to cover and they tell you they read the Bible 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, and they're still the same. Because unless God brings this, the Holy Spirit ministers these words to our hearts and we change our ways, it has no impact. So what I wanted to ask the panelists and the thought there is, how should this principle of mixing holy and unholy go even beyond marriage, as in husband and a wife? What about business partnerships? What about ways that we get mingled and tangled with people who don't know God, who have no idea who our God is, who don't stand for our principles? When you have a scrupulous business partner who is a crook, who has nothing to do with the Lord, who's a thief in his heart and looking at ways to steal from the people that he's working for, and how does this kind of lesson apply to that?
Yes, it does apply.
Good morning. I would say it would apply to as in the separation part, because once you know who your true self is, once you're in God, you know what He stands for, you can separate yourself from them. Of course, you're forced to interact with them, but at a certain point, like if it's the business partner, you can do the business the correct way, the uncrooked way, and then step back and explain to them that you don't, make it known that you're not okay with what they're doing, because then it may interject a thought into their head to let them know that they are crooked. And you can try to introduce, but if you see that they're not taking it, then still separate yourself.
You say we ought to be separate so we can be a witness to those who are out there, and be different. And every day, people are watching us. We don't realize sometimes, people don't have to tell you, but they are looking at the way, they're looking at how you handle a situation and say, that's the Christian up there every Sabbath, and look at how they present himself, and I was such this honest way of dealing with it. They're watching us. They may not say it to you, but they're seeing our interactions. And brother, you were saying about that. Go ahead with that point.
I go further to say that your lifestyle is the best sermon that you can ever preach. And there are times when you're working in an organization, like for me back at home, they know you're a Christian,
right?
But they do everything to make something bad to see how you would react. I remember I looked at my supervisor and said, you are my crucible. You are the stumbling block in my way, and I'm going to use you as a stepping stone. Unfortunately, she removed me from that post. But nevertheless, I'm saying sometimes you have to stand up. You got to let people know exactly what you stand for or who you is, because they will definitely use something to get to you.
Amen. Amen. All right, moving right along. We have 5 minutes, I think. All right. Okay. Ezra, now we are seeing that, and it's key to know that I'm going to have to tie it all together because we're running out of time. It's key that we realize now. So the plan was, for what was happening in Israel, they had to separate. Not just, okay, they had to put these wives away. Send them back, because, send them back to their fathers, send them back to their lands where they came from. This was the step that had to be taken because of what was happening to the nation. Because of the fact that they were losing who they were no longer behaving as people and children of God, and the drastic measure that had to be taken was to separate yourself, put away, and send them back. Now, they made sure to emphasize that the words that were used here were not words of just divorce. They were not just saying divorce your wives, and it was not to be given as an example to be used in all situations. And we have to be very clear about that, because sometimes if we're not careful, we take the Bible, we don't use it in context, and we apply it everywhere it's not to be applied. This was specific for this time, this drastic putting away. And they go even further to say that it's not that it was so much a divorce, but more nullifying a marriage, because as if they were saying these marriages are shams. This is not marriage that God never had anything to do with these marriages in the first place. In the sight of God, these marriages did not exist. You marrying somebody from Moab, heathen, idol-worshipping person, this marriage in God's eyes did not even happen. So go ahead and send her back, and it's not even as if you were married. That's exactly what they were saying. But we cannot use this example to apply now with our situation. And it goes on to say that in Thursdays, it says, however, towards the end of Wednesday, it said something. Time running out of me. Okay. Over time, what happened? Same, they went back and started marrying again. Right? Even after the purge and the separation. And it speaks to us as a people that humanity struggles with staying close to Christ. And we can relate. Put the light on ourselves. How many times have we thought we got a victory over something? And before long, we find ourselves in the same position that we thought, right? We have to put God first and allow him to lead. So panelists, I have a question. This drastic measure was done to purify God's people. What about in our church? I've seen and heard over here a lot of people that separate themselves from the body, saying that we need to be pure. And there's too much corruption in the church. So, Brother George, you and I are, we know the truth, so we are going to come together and meet a certain place because we don't think the church is pure. Have we heard that? Yes. We don't believe, we see the corruption which is coming from different places and, different things we see and we don't agree with it. So we say, let's meet by ourselves in some house or we rent this place and we are our own Adventist church. What do we think about that? How does that work?
Well,
are we called to do that?
This is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. As a matter of fact, Ellen G. White says all these little groups will come to nothing. She places emphasis on the original church. All right? So those little groups you see Adventists branching out and doing all that, she says all will come to naught. Now, those people who behave that they are pure and the church is not pure, just give them a little time, they become unpure. Give them a little time, not a lot, just a little time, they become unpure. All right? Jesus says, let the wheat and the tares grow together
13,
until the
30.
harvest.
Yes.
All right? Yes. So do not be misled. Do not be confused, my Christian friends. The original church is God's church.
Yes. Thank you so much. And
teacher, one other thing again, where you look at as Adventists and people, whether you want to form a small group or you want to say, boy, the church is not pure, so let's say, I'm going to leave God's original church and I'm going to find a next church. The thing about it, we have this bad concept, say, oh, I leave the church. You can't leave God's church. God's church leave you. Because God's church is going to continue to move whether you stay or whether you go. So that's the fact we're about leaving church. We can't leave God's church.
all right. God's church will stand. God's church, the true church, will stand. Okay, and as we wrap up, we're going to touch quickly on the last topics, which is marriage today. Marriage today. So we are touching the fact that this situation cannot be applied, the drastic measures, because it's not to be taken that, okay, so where do we find ourselves? I got married to a person and now I'm married and my spouse is not a Christian. What am I supposed to do? I'm married, I've given my life to Christ, I love Jesus with all my heart, I want to serve him, but my spouse is not there yet. What counsel do we have from the Bible about dealing with people who have already married and find themselves in this position?
1 Corinthians 7 gives us some good counseling. All right? Paul gave us some good counseling about husbands that have a Christian wife and vice versa. He encourages the Christian to stay with the individual, live with them, and be an example so that eventually they can become one. Now, if they choose not to become one, but they can live with you, live with them. But he's saying if the non-Christian decide to separate themselves, allow them to go. You are not under bondage. In other words, you are not tied to them. If they decide to go, let them go. And if you decide to remarry, you can do so. All right? Because you are not under bondage. But I want to continue that comment. I want to bring something else because I did a little further research on it. There are today people that are married. Their first marriage and they have divorced and remarried. Inspiration is telling us in the book Counsels on Testimonies on Sexual Behavior, Divorce, and Adultery. In these books, it's helping us understand that there are some marriages that it may be annulled. It may be, in the sight of men, you are divorced to that person. But in the sight of God, you are still married to that person. Now, if that is a case, and you remarry, that remarriage is wrong. That remarriage is wrong, and it can affect your spiritual life, and it can affect your salvation. That is a problem. But she's saying now there are other divorces based on the situation. God understands that divorce. So today we do not have to take the Nehemiah approach or the Ezra approach. But there is information and counsel that is necessary for us to understand, especially for those who have not gotten married, to know that marriage and divorce can cause you to lose your salvation, especially if you remarry. It can happen.
All right, thank you. So we are finding that there is grace for those who have already married, but is also, we have to be careful because we always have those who will seek to use it as, okay, so I can find grace. So let me go ahead and marry out and find grace, come in and find the grace after I've gone and made a poor decision knowingly. Is that what we're counseled to do? No. This is for those who have found themselves in it after giving their life to Christ and realize, well, here I am now. I am married to an unbeliever, but how do I deal with it? And that's the counsel that we have been given. I want to throw something out there. Our time is up, and I want to thank the panelists and everybody for this. Is that a Hannah sit down there? We are wrapping up. This time is up for us. But I want to throw something out there. And it's this. Can we marry a person who is baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and still be unequally yoked spiritually? Because many times the push is marry somebody in the church. And in the church means you're on the books and we're that way. But brethren, it is for us to know Christ as individuals and allow Christ to lead us in this decision. Because many are people, and this will be the final quote I will use, and we will turn over on that note. It's a quote Sister White says in Last Day Event. She says, "It's a solemn statement I make to the church. Not 1 in 20 whose names are registered upon the church books are prepared to close their earthly history and would be as verily without God and without hope in the world as a common sinner." So there are many of us on church books that are not born again, don't have Christ in us, and those who are searching for partners need to be aware that it's not just that a person is in church, attending church, that fits them to be a partner in marriage. That person has to have a relationship, and God himself can help us to know who these are. So thank you so much. In 10 seconds.
Just a point that I wanted to bring up from Thursday's lesson, 10 seconds. It says, Satan is happy when we end up married to a person who does not encourage devotion to God, because he knows that if both spouses have the same conviction, then they will be stronger in their mission work for God than if just one is faithful.
Praise God. Thank you. And so, we'll leave with these remarks in your mind. God desires us to be a pure and holy people. He required it then, he requires it now. The church must never be afraid or ashamed to declare what God says. Choices in marriage can have serious implications and must be entered upon with God's guidance. It could determine the eternal destiny of you and your family. And finally, I will leave you with this verse. 1 Peter 2 verse 9. We are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Thanks to everyone, and special thanks to all our panelists. You see, we have panelists from all different ages represented, right? I tried to have a mix of different. Oh, okay. And yes, Brother George. And thanks to everyone for your participation. May God help us that we will stay true to him so that when he comes, we will be ready.